If we assume that a creator exists, then our existence is easily explained. It was ordained and no more thought is necessary. We exist because God decided to create us for some mysterious purpose we can never understand. But the reality is so much more incredible. I'm not talking about the fact that life exists. That's a different story altogether. But how unbelievably lucky you and I are that we exist. And here I specifically mean you and I, and not some distant relatives who exist in our place. This is the Atheism for Beginners channel, and I'm your host, Christian Exenberger. Most of us take life for granted and think little of it because there's nothing but life, people, animals and plants all around us. Life is quite common, so we never really think about how lucky we are that we exist. What is the probability that you and I exist, and not a brother or sister who may have been born if the circumstances of our conception had been a little different? So please let me take you on a short statistical trip through probability and the unlikely event of our existence. Of how even the most incredibly outrageous odds imaginable don't come close to describing how lucky we are to have been born. Unfortunately, this means that we do need to do a little maths, but I will try to keep this as simple as possible, because the numbers are there just to illustrate a point, and will be greatly underestimated anyway. Let's begin with the most conservative example imaginable, one that even a young earth creationist believing in the literal Adam and Eve can't argue with. Say the world is only 6,000 years old, that a generation lasts 30 years, and that a male produces 1,000 sperm cells per ejaculation and produces offspring for each ejaculation, as approved by most religions. For the sake of simplicity, I will exclude the additional variability introduced into the equation by your mother for now. The astute will have realized that this implies a 1 in 1,000 probability that the combination that created you was the lucky combination to have succeeded among all the other possibilities. Or to put it differently, based on these parameters, the probability that you were born to your parents rather than another brother or sister is 1 in 1,000. I don't know about you, but I really don't like my chances. If we calculate the probability of you being descended from your grandparents, it's 1 in a million, and 1 in a billion for your great-grandparents. That's just 3 generations, not even 100 years. Given that we have 6,000 years since Adam and Eve, according to our creationist friend, and each generation lasts 30 years, we calculate that 200 generations have passed. So we can calculate the probability that your direct ancestors were successful in producing the exact line of descendants that resulted in you, exponentiates 1,000-fold for each generation, which gives us a probability of 1 in, and there's no name for the number, but it is the number 1 followed by 600 zeros. Let me put it up for you here. I could rest my case that you and I are unbelievably lucky to exist there and probably have made my point, but I'm not done yet, not even close. That was the most conservative example I could have given to explain the maths. The reality is that the average human male ejaculation will produce between 200 million and 500 million sperm cells, and the average human female will produce between 150 and 450 egg cells in a lifetime. Then consider that most ejaculations don't result in conception, and neither do most egg cells. So let's calculate this again, still at the conservative end. Hypothetically, let's say that each of your male ancestors produced 20 billion sperm cells in a lifetime, on average. 200 million per ejaculation, multiplied by 100 times, only one of which resulted in you or one of your direct ancestors. Then multiply that by 150 egg cells, which is the conservative end of what your female ancestors will have produced, of which only one will be the lucky one that is yours. This gives us a probability of 1 in 3 trillion that your ancestors produced another of your ancestors, rather than some distant cousins, uncles or aunts. In the past, generations were probably closer to 20 or 25 years, and human history spans not the 6,000 years that young earth creationists believe, but somewhere between 150 and 250,000 years, according to current estimates. Taking the shorter estimate and multiplying this by 25-year generations, we are looking at around 6,000 generations of humans. So we need to multiply 3 trillion by itself 6,000 times. I'm going to reduce that to 1 trillion, shamelessly improving your odds because I'm lazy and want to keep this simple. Multiplying 12 zeros of a trillion by 6,000 generations gives us a number beginning with 1, which is then followed by 72,000 zeros. I'm not going to put that up because it would fill a quarter of a book, and certainly isn't going to fit on your screen. 1 followed by 72,000 zeros to 1 is the probability that, of all the humans ever to have existed, you or I are lucky enough to have been one of them. And you thought the 1 in 42 million probability of winning the lottery was lucky. The funny part is that if you hadn't won the existence lottery already, winning any other lottery is a moot point. You would think I'd be done there, but I'm not. But don't worry, I won't be doing any more maths. I'm sure you understand how these numbers exponentiate, so I will leave the rest to your imagination. It isn't feasible for me to calculate anyway. Next, we head back into prehistoric times, to those who came before us who weren't modern humans, to our pre-human ancestors whose existence dates back millions of years. Then further back to early primates, early mammals, early vertebrae, early multicelled and single-celled organisms dating back billions of years. Sexual reproduction dates back possibly 2 billion years, and life another 1.5 billion before that. It's safe to say that with each generation there was only a tiny probability that the individual who came into existence was your ancestor, as opposed to another very similar but different individual who wasn't your ancestor, one whose existence meant you don't get to exist. Extrapolate that back for 3.5 billion years, with many early generations probably no longer than a year or two. Then factor in the probability that each ancestor was lucky enough not only to have been born, but also to have survived to adulthood, succeeded in finding a mate and producing offspring. The number is now so staggeringly large that I can't begin to fathom, let alone calculate it. Then we need to consider the initial spark of life, where a self-replicating non-life form became a life form. Who knows the probability of that event? Did it happen only once or many times? Perhaps seconds and millimeters apart, or a million years on opposite sides of the world. When and where it happened could easily have been different. The entire existence of life on this planet could have been spawned from a different origin, and an entirely different set of species would have existed on Earth instead of us. And with that, we head out into the universe. What if the circumstances of our planet's creation were a little different, or our solar system, galaxy, or universe? If we assume that a creator exists, then our existence as individuals is easily explained. It was ordained and no more thinking is required. We exist as determined by God because we were created for some divine purpose He is unwilling to share. He specifically created you and me because we are two of the people He wanted, and with that, all the wonder of our existence's incredible improbability disappears. Not to mention that while our existence is easily explained using the God hypothesis, the reality is that it explains nothing. The reason I bring this up is because of the number of times I've heard religious people or people who have lost their faith in religion question the value of their lives without some overarching divine purpose. It has less to do with proving a religion wrong than it has to do with making you aware of just how lucky you are to be alive and to be human, so that you can contemplate your existence and hopefully gain a better appreciation of what you are and what you have. To appreciate that your life is worth more than that of a serf, put on this planet to serve a master of dubious motivation. To appreciate how rare and precious is this life that you and I have, as are the lives of those around us. I look at religious people who see life as nothing more than preparation for what comes after and gleefully throw it away on hands and knees, hoping for something better, and it makes me sad. I shudder at the mindset that takes all that we are and reduces it to a test to judge what reward we will be worthy of in an imaginary afterlife. This life is it. It is the most incredible gift, and when it is over, we return to the nothing from which we came. So grab life by the balls, baby, and live it for all you're worth. And then remember how precious are the lives of all those around you. They are not merely living out a test to see if they are worthy of what comes after. A life cut short is not the start of a new chapter. It is the end, the last word in the last book of their story. They have nothing to fear when it is over, but it will be over. This is the only life we're getting, and we are so incredibly lucky to have it. This is why I look with horror at those whose scriptures and beliefs make them think they will be rewarded in an afterlife for an act of destruction of the lives of those who may not believe as they do. This is my life. I've squandered too much of it already, and I'm on its waste. I will die far too soon and fade away into oblivion and be gone forever. But I understand that this life is the most incredible gift, and it is not to be taken for granted. I am happy that I've had this life despite all odds, and I will always be grateful for it. When it is over, I will return to the oblivion where I came from, unafraid, along with all the other missed chances that never were, having had a life that they did not. But I will not be sad for them, because they never existed to know what they missed. And we could never have known them, so they cannot be mourned. I will join the rest of the particles in the universe, which themselves are lucky to exist. Thank you for watching. If you found something interesting here, please like, subscribe and share, and leave a comment. This has been the Atheism for Beginners channel. Until next time, goodbye.